Right. How are we all?
Not bad, thank you.
Getting more enthusiastic. We like it.
Looking forward to when we can get a very good from Jake.
I'm thinking maybe around episode 6, episode 7, we'll reach sort of peak.
Once I've
enthusiasm.
defrosted.
How are you getting on, Paul?
Yeah, good. Always good. Always good. Well, not always good, but I won't bore you with the details. So yeah, good. Right, let's get into it.
Been a while.
Hi folks, and welcome to episode 3 of The Cutting Room. And this week we're going to be talking all about how to save money when creating videos. So guys, here we are again. How are we all doing today?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. I'm working up to that. Very good. It'll come, don't worry.
Good. Really interesting topic, I think,
Yeah.
today. Obviously, with kind of current climate and everything, it's something that everyone's kind of looking at, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, who don't want to save money, right?
No, exactly right. So what's been going on? What have you been up to?
Quite a lot, actually. Probably a lot of projects that are quite relevant to what we're talking about, really. We're doing a lot of remote filming, a lot of animations. It's been really interesting, actually, because it's not something that traditionally done in the past, but it's good to learn about new different ways of delivering content. So yeah, it's been an interesting time.
Yeah. We've also got a few jobs coming up where we get to leave the UK again, which is
Yeah, it'd be
nice.
nice to get on about. It seems like it's been a little while. I know we've got myself and Joe are going over to Data Cloud Global Congress over in Monaco in April, which would be cool. And then so there's a few of us away filming ITW over in Washington. So it'd be nice to, and that's over in May time. So it'd be nice to sort of get out and about.
Definitely, yeah. It's been a while. Well, actually, that's a lie. It's
Not for
been.
you.
Not
Yeah.
It'd be good to get away with everyone, I think, if it's the right way to put it.
Cool. So yeah, this episode is all about sort of ways in which we can save people money, essentially. Now, everyone, looking at what it's been like for the last year, and even probably longer, if we're perfectly honest, sort of post-pandemic and all the uncertainty that was around last year. We were hearing a lot about budgets being cut. We were chatting off air about a study from last year where 1 in 5 B2B companies had the marketing budgets cut mid-year, which is quite astounding, really. That's 20% of all businesses.
It's a lot. Yeah.
It's kind of been a knock-on effect, really. I mean, when the pandemic hit, everyone expected a bit of a downturn as a immediate result of that, which was almost the opposite. And then we're kind of seeing the knock-on effects of everything now, which I think we've adapted to it quite well.
Yeah, I think there was also a lot of funding and support back in the pandemic. I'm not going to get political but there's a lot less of that knocking about, put it that way.
I think it is something that, like I said, with everything that's gone on, it's obviously budgets being cut. It's never been more important to get value for money with the things that you're doing. And I think with so many budgets being cut, it does provide an opportunity for people, particularly in marketing, to stand out against competitors who have had budgets cuts. And even if you have yourself, look at ways you can kind of make the most of what you've got and put it into the right channels and medium.
Yeah, it's like anything, whoever adapts best to the current circumstances will be the ones who are still strong at the end.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, one thing we're hearing a lot, from people that work in marketing, similar to ourselves, is I guess the negative impact that cutting or reducing your marketing budget can have, which we all agree with. But I guess it's kind of what everyone's going to say when you kind of sell those services anyway. And I think for me, it's the reality of business, and that is kind of what's happening, whether we agree with it or not. A lot of the bigger companies are certainly doing that. And I guess to kick us off, for me, firstly, when it comes purely down to video, is that we're seeing a lot more people taking things in-house and creating their own content. Yeah,
I mean, it is a natural progression, really, from getting external agencies, much like ourselves, to come and do everything. You're looking more at in-house resources, the skills that you do currently have, and if you do have that, then you're always going to kind of opt to go with that. I think where the angle we're coming from is more around how you can maximise that and where agencies like ourselves can potentially help if needed.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense because there is an ever growing need for creating content. There's a big pressure now on companies, on marketing departments, on individuals to meet those demands and create a lot of content across a lot of different platforms.
Yeah, and I think for video content in particular to work well, you need a lot of it. It needs to be regular, so it does make sense for people doing it in house. And I think, and for me as the owner of Seven, I actually think it's a good thing because it means that people really see the value in video marketing, and actually kind of the bigger productions sit alongside those other kind of in-house kind of regular content that they're doing. So I kind of see it as a good thing for us.
Yeah,
it's something that's happening regardless of the market conditions. Is people kind of being kind of self-taught, making their own videos, and there are a lot more independent filmmakers and content creators. Everyone's skills are kind of improving. So.
Well, we spoke about TikTok in the last episode. Like, you've got a generation of people now coming up and going into the workplace, who have been brought up on creating videos themselves. So that the skill set or the skill levels have certainly increased quite considerably. So for anybody sort of listening or watching, then if they're going to start creating their own content, what do they need to be focusing on doing, or what do they need to be getting?
I think they need to make sure that regardless of the method in which you're shooting and creating, you've got to still make sure that your messaging's strong. And, it comes down to a lot of things that we mentioned in the last episode around identifying target audience, finding out the best form in which you can do that. I think those principles still remain strong. I think those can actually really help with the way that you're creating your own stuff, because if you do have a strong message and a strong story, you're relying less on the technical capabilities and resources you have to kind of elevate it.
Yeah, and I think you're right, you do need the messaging, and I think people who are thinking of doing their own content, I would just say I think it's probably the best time since time began to be doing that. Like where technology is, like look at what you've got in your pocket. Like you don't need a lot now to start producing.
What do you have in your pocket?
Well, actually, my phone's on the floor. But do you know what I mean? Like phones, like the cameras on them, they're better than the first cameras that we bought at Seven years ago. I mean, it wasn't even HD when we first started. And so there are so many tools out there for people to get good content, and you'll see it all over.
So what are those tools? What should people sort of, when they've got the phone, what should they be doing?
So in terms of other tools and equipment, I think first off, the biggest consideration for me when making your own video is audio. You can have the best camera in the world, but if the audio isn't great, then it's still going to sound a bit shit. And there's loads of things that you can do with that. A really easy and affordable way is you can buy little Thai lavalier mics from Amazon for under 15 quid, which will just drastically improve that audio level, which is, for me, that's probably the fundamental that you need to get right. There's also looking at making sure that the camera's stable. So again, Amazon, if you're starting off really low budget, is you can get cheap tripods. You can even get fairly cheap gimbals.
I saw a clip on LinkedIn of one guy who actually just used an old toilet roll tube and just cut two little slides in it and just put his phone in there. I mean, that's going real budget end, but it's just something that's going to hold your phone still and not have someone's wobbly hand holding it.
Yeah,
I think as well as the bits of kit that you can buy, there's a lot of fundamentals and principles that you can look at that don't require any extra equipment. Just things like where you choose to shoot, the way you frame a shot, the way controlling your audio, like you mentioned, Joe. I think there's a lot of tips that are out there that can completely transform the quality of your content without actually spending any money.
And I think another good thing which people will be well aware of with the kind of rise in AI and ChatGPT over the last kind of few months.
I wonder when you're going to drop that in. I can't believe you've waited 3 episodes.
I have. But no, there's lots of, like, ChatGPT everyone knows about at the moment, which is great. But there's other things.
Is it great though? Is it? There's a lot of controversy out there.
It can be good. I think there's a good starting point. It can get
if
into
used right,
used correctly.
if used correctly, it can certainly save some time.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. It's not going to take over anything. But there's a really good piece of software which is good for video editing, which is called video.ai. I'll send a link to it, or put a link somewhere, where you can put your video up, and this computer will then cut it down for you to different segments, and then also put it in the right formats for different social media platforms.
I find my phone doing that itself, like creating little slideshows of videos using my photos. I've not even asked for it. It's there.
I saw another cool thing as well was again it's using similar technology where it's maintaining eye contact. So you've got, it looks a bit creepy to be fair. So I think by the time, I think obviously once that's developed, but you've got someone reading a script sort of off, you know, it shows you both angles, and on the AI version you're just looking down the lens and speaking. So it's quite interesting. It was a bit crap, but I feel like you can kind of see where things are going, and once that's been refined, I think
it'll be massive, and I think it's a good thing. I know a lot of people worry about like what it's going to do for jobs and stuff, but
robots taking over.
Yeah, I don't see it like that. I think it's going to assist us to make better things and have more time to do things, because it can speed up part of the process. In particular, like creating your own video content, that's a really good thing for that.
So when you're creating your own content, then so there's obviously certain, you know, in my opinion, there's certain content you should be creating with professionals, and there's certain content that you can, you know, produce yourself. And you know, the old one is sort of anything that kind of goes on your website. You want that ideally to be sort of professionally produced. Anything that's going to be, you know, quick, raw, going out on your social media channels can be created in-house or have that kind of lower production value. And I guess the next point is kind of just chatting about understanding when people should be investing and when, you know, and where they should be saving. So where are the areas where we think they can save a bit of money, and where are the areas where we think that it's not, that you don't want to be scrimping on?
I think it all comes down to planning long term and looking at what points you're wanting to introduce different things. And I think in that sense, you identify what things you are going to invest in. For example, a camera crew to come and film for you, but then have in mind the other sort of in-house edits or kind of the social media stuff that you can actually get content from that, and you can kind of plan ahead, and then you're relying less on having to do multiple projects further down the line because you've already got the stuff in-house in the can.
And I think another big thing which we always talk about, if you are gonna, you know, if you don't have the budget for both the filming and editing element, is that certainly from our perspective, we'd always want control of the edit, because you can edit something that's filmed not very well to look quite nice, but if something's filmed perfectly and edited terribly, it's going to look crap.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point to bring up, and a really good place for people to look at investing if they don't want to spend the money on the filming or can't afford to get a professional editor in, because that can make a huge difference. And I think in terms of types of content where you don't really want to scrimp, it's kind of your brand video, hero videos, kind of top funnel type stuff, where for me, I don't think you do want to scrimp there. That's where you want to invest some money in. But I think maybe like case studies and testimonials, there's a good argument that they can be done like that. There's also an argument that can come across more authentic as well if you can keep control of it.
It's an interesting one with case study, isn't it? It's a fine line, isn't it, between having that authentic feel, but it also not looking like you've just pushed your customer up against a white wall and you got your phone out and asked them loads of questions.
Yeah,
I think, you know, a big part of it is identifying what skills you do have in-house and what you can do, and then you're using an agency perhaps to plug in the gaps where you feel like you can't quite achieve that. I think it's striking the balance and identifying those areas.
It's having conversations with them as well. I think we've heard, you know, over all too many times, oh no, that's out of budget, it's not worth it, and it's just like a final, that can't happen. But once we've sort of opened more conversations with clients, it's actually, we can, what budget do you have to work with, right? So within that, there's different options available, so there's always going to be a way in which you can create something at a reduced cost. It just comes down to an element of compromise and a conversation.
As you say, that is the best thing, is speaking to the video company that you're using, if you use somebody, and don't just think, oh, if we don't have the budget for it, we can't do anything. There's so many options out there now that it's just finding the right places to put your resources and then leverage other people's skills on top of that.
So that kind of takes us on to the next point, really, about what different technologies are out there which can help to kind of keep those costs down. And one thing that we're using a lot at the moment is sort of filming remotely, because production costs, certainly when you go out and filming, can be quite heavy in certain areas. And we're filming a lot of kind of interview content remotely now, aren't we?
Yeah, so I mean, the main purpose of interview content traditionally is to kind of drive the story and act as almost like a voiceover at times. So what we're seeing is a lot of companies are conducting the interviews remotely, which not only saves on costs, but we've also had an ongoing project that's all around sustainability, and from that angle, the amount of energy we're saving by doing that. So there's a kind of a positive message around that, and what's worked really well with those is we're doing the interviews remotely, we're getting a decent standard of quality due to the software that we've started using, and we're repurposing sort of archive footage that they have to create really nice case studies that are working really well.
And I think it does work well for case studies because, you know, we're now, they're much more affordable. They are, as you say, much more friendly on the planet. There's less, you know, from a sustainability angle, there's less travelling involved to create them. And thirdly, there's less time involved for your client, you know, as opposed to going up and filming for half a day or a day and to taking that out of their sort of diary, you're spending an hour filming remotely, and then then it's done. And I think to go back to the point about cost, you know, you can be, in terms of creating a case study, you can be spending $4 or $5 to create one if it's filmed nicely, and I still think there is a real need for that type of content, because that's what's going to sit on your website. However, there is still that need now, or that acceptance of that kind of lower budget, lower production value now, and you could be creating those types of videos filmed remotely for £1,500, £2,000, and it's just you can be doing, you know, 2 or 3 for the cost of doing one.
And it enables you to do that regularly then, and you can kind of look at, again, previous episode we touched on understanding your target audience. You can have case studies for each of those buying personas that are going to resonate with them without, for the same price as doing one, you can get 3 or 4, and then you can start doing it regularly. And I think, like you mentioned, it is a really big thing to bear in mind with your client. If it's only going to take an hour out of the day, or an hour and a half, as opposed to 8 hours, that's huge, isn't it? I think it opens you up to better clients as well, who are willing to talk, like some of the big ones, if that's going to be important.
And for us as well, we were always a bit hesitant to create content like that ourselves, because we're like, well, we're a video company, it has to be sort of top production value. And it was kind of born out of the pandemic. We had a really good case study with Heineken that we've worked with a lot over the last sort of 9 years. We wanted to capture that case study. We couldn't get onto site to film it, but we deemed that capturing that content in a not as nice looking production was much more important than actually having it look perfect but wait 2 years to be able to film it.
They've really come on as well. I think the remote case studies that we have done, you know, the first few, they were the first ones we'd done, so we didn't really know any of the extra things you can do in post-production to kind of elevate it. But one thing that we have done is imposing it onto actual shot footage that we get ourselves, and putting the interview frame onto a laptop screen or a TV screen, for example. And I think the more we've done it, there's been new things that we've learned and different techniques that we've used that have really kind of got us to a point where it's actually a really viable product.
I think it is, and I think the feedback we get on that Heineken one, we do get a lot of comments on it, don't we?
Yeah.
And I think what has helped is obviously the technology that you mentioned, Jake. So we use Riverside FM. Traditionally in the past, the issue doing them remotely would be kind of latency on your internet and reliant on that, whereas this software doesn't do that. It kind of records it locally to either computer, which just gives you a more reliable recording, doesn't it?
Yeah, much better quality image, and I think like what was seen as quite a low budget kind of style video is actually nowhere near as bad as kind of what you would expect. And we've been like, oh, for £1,500, that is really really good, and particularly in these times that we're when budgets are being cut, more and more people are exploring that as an option.
Well, they're accepted now. Earlier on, if you look sort of 3 years ago or whatever, and you saw something that was filmed on a phone or remotely, like we've been saying, it would have been quite sort of alien to a lot of people. But I think slowly over time, over the last few years, it's just something that is accepted, and it's actually become quite effective, I think.
So what's stopping clients doing this themselves? So like what value can companies like us provide by conducting those interviews?
I think it's the experience that we have in terms of interviewing. We've got years of experience between us in getting the right story out of people, helping out with pre-production, helping them put their content plans together and really making it work well for them. Because I think in-house, if you're just going to conduct an interview and you're not really used to the different things that you're to listen out for, how to frame an answer, you can still kind of fall into that trap of it being a bit looking really sort of homemade almost sort of thing. I think where we can come in and really add value is coaching people through that, and also in post-production as well. I think
you mentioned one thing there about the answer, and the one thing I always hear whenever we create case studies is I've got 5 questions, I've got 10 questions, but which are great, but you want to know what are the answers you're wanting to get, because you want to structure the video that you're creating around the answers you're going to get. Because if you just got a list of questions and you just get any old answer back, you've got no control over what that video is going to look like or sound like.
No, and I think that's probably the biggest thing we learned like years ago. Like when we first set up 9 years ago, you was just going out with questions. Yeah. And you're kind of like praying and hoping you get something good, and then you get to the edit and you're trying to figure it out. Whereas what we do now and what we'd recommend to clients, particularly if they are going to go and do it themselves, is think about the answers that you need and then build the questions around that. And then when you're doing it, double check that you're getting them.
And keep asking the question relentlessly till you get the answer. Grind them down.
It's still only a small part of the process, really, isn't it? The filming side of things. There's still a lot more that goes on before and a lot that goes on after that are still important to kind of elevate the quality of your videos. So I think whilst of course we have been talking about people doing things themselves, but we still have a lot of value that we can add in other stages to kind of get the most out of it.
Yeah, definitely. So that kind of takes us on to our next point. We've sort of touched on reducing costs from a filming perspective. I guess there's other ways in which you can reduce costs across a video project, and that's looking at more maybe like animation style, or we call them like edit only projects, but they're basically just a job where you just rely on any sort of existing assets or content or any sort of existing footage.
Yeah, and that's to split them up. So say if we're speaking of edit only stuff, that's a really good way of saving money, and that's kind of what we would do is we would use either stock or self-shot stuff by the client and edit that into a nice looking video that kind of hits the key messages that they're trying to convey. And that is I think a very good cost-effective way. And it's a bit similar to the remote filming, because you may also do bits where, and again we do it with one of our clients, Heineken, where obviously they're a big company. Some of the people that they need in the videos have got very busy days. They can't take out a day out to film, and what you might do is get different bits of content of them delivering it, and then we edit that together. So it saves money, but it also saves time for people as well.
And it brings us back to what we said is having control of the edit is really important. So when we do the remote filming, as I mentioned, we do film that remotely, but then we edit it. But then also in this instance, people are they're still filming their own interviews to a certain extent, but we control that edit, so we control that consistency throughout the video.
I think it's worth bearing in mind as well, if you do decide to conduct a shoot, getting a camera crew on site, is to bear in mind there's edit-only jobs that can come off the back of that. So, if you have people on site and you do have a bit of time, it's worth getting an extra bank of footage just in case, just generic shots of, like if we talk about Heineken, of different lines, different products, just building up that bank of content so that when the time does come and you're like, right, we need to create a video on XYZ, you can conduct a remote interview and use the bank of footage that you have, or just use the footage that you've shot and mix in some animations and graphics in there as well.
Yeah, and I think again the other thing you touched on was animation as a way of saving money, and I think animation's a really good way, in particular I think for like product videos, of getting across things that can be quite complicated in a really short and succinct way. And it saves money because you're not relying on people and sending people out filming. You've got animators doing that work, and I think it's a really good tool for that.
It can be quite flexible as well, I think, animation, because if you're talking about a video that's shot with people coming to your site and doing all that, you're already locked into a certain price bracket in terms of getting people to site and the time for the day, whereas what animation offers is a few different price brackets in which you can probably fit your budget into, depending on what sort of things you want creating in there, but it does give you that those options.
And certainly with animation, because of how it is costed up, very generally speaking, like the longer the animation, the more expensive it is. From a filming perspective, you kind of you cut your footage down, and animation's very the opposite really, where you're building out each kind of frame and scene. And I think, if you are going to go down the animation route, just be really sort of tight with your script. Keep it as short as possible, because the longer the script, the more money you're going to spend.
And it'll end up being less of a good video unless it won't resonate with the audience as much, because you've kind of overcomplicated it again. If you can't do it in 60 seconds, then there's usually something.
You can be really sort of succinct and tight on the content that you're producing, because a lot of the time it's either a scripted voiceover or text on screen. You can be a lot more to the point, I think, whereas if you're going to try and get someone to speak about something and get a certain amount of messages across, they've got to weave that into their kind of vocabulary. So I think it is a different way of doing things, but it can be really effective.
And I think just one final thing on animation for me, which is good, particularly for like global companies or people who are dealing with different countries and different regions, animations are really easy to get a different voiceover in a different language. It's easy to change a little bit more than it would be for filming if there's any tweaks that might be more specific or relevant to a certain...
There's some shockingly dubbed TV adverts out there at the moment. I don't know why they've gone down that route, but it's just so obvious that they're speaking in, say, German, and they've put like a really weird English voiceover over the top of it.
There is technology coming through where it can actually change your lips to actually be speaking in a different language, which don't know how scary that is, but it's coming.
Unfortunately, it's not there yet, because I tested it, and it just makes you look really creepy. Like my lips moved, but my face didn't, and I was just like, it was really weird.
But yeah, I think there's some good things in there and about sort of saving costs around production. But I think also on the flip side, it's making the investment work harder for you, and looking at ways in which you can get longevity out of the content that you're creating. And and a big thing we always talk about here is repurposing your content, making the most out of it, making it go further for you. Can you be cutting it down into shorter form content, using it across different platforms, and just really sort of looking at ways in which you can kind of repurpose that content?
Yeah, I think when doing that, it's really important to be quite strategic and plan when you are creating a bank of content or a project. Think about how many extra things you can get out of it, and if you know those things when you're going into it, you can tweak things, you can do little retakes of things, and you are then set up to not have to do several projects throughout the space of a year, for example. If you know that within that year you want content to do this, this and this, you can actually do a lot in the first instance to make it that you've got it all, you're all set up then for the rest of your plan.
And I think we'll see that a lot this year. I know a lot of people talk about short form is kind of king for this year, which it is, but a lot of it comes from long form videos. Well, like this, for example, like doing podcasts and longer form video content, you can get quite a lot in a fairly short space of time that can then deliver content for the next few months. So I think it's a really long form content's a really good way of getting short form content, if that makes sense.
But I think, like, touching on what you said there, Jake, as well, we've done shoots for clients where it's kind of a half-day shoot and you can create sort of 10, 15 short little 30-second snippets, not at a high price point, because it's it doesn't take much film. We can film it in our office, and what that actually gives them is sort of a few months worth of content to push out on a weekly basis. So it's making the most of that investment, I guess, but also making sure you're repurposing it. And I think another thing for me as well is resharing your good content as well. Like, one thing we're seeing quite a lot of the time is how people are creating a video but they're a bit reluctant to share it too many times.
Yeah, people I think get it stuck in their head that once they've posted it, everyone's seen it. And I think, well, obviously that's not true. Like, with the way the algorithm works, it is really important. As long as it's still relevant to the people you're communicating to, then use it as much as you can. And use it in different places. If you've created a video for TikTok, that can then be used on LinkedIn. It can also be used on YouTube Shorts or whatever, Instagram Reels. Just really making the most of that. And if you think about that...
But if you think that people... as you mentioned, people are reluctant to share the videos because they think people have seen it. You'd always rather you share it numerous times and it reaches more people, and one or two people think, oh God, I've seen that a few times, than you just sharing it once or twice, it only reaching a few people and a lot of people not actually seeing it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you'd want. And you've also got to realise that how much... people may have watched that video like 4 weeks ago. I mean, it's not like it's ingrained in their head for the rest of their life.
They've been doing other things. It's not all about you, despite how we often think it is.
It's about bearing in mind longevity as well when you are creating something. If you're going to really timestamp it and kind of put yourself in a corner of, we can't really reshare this, then you're not going to get the maximum out of it. But I think just bearing that in mind, that you may want to reshare this, and having a plan around it as well. It always comes back to planning, but if you've got a plan throughout a period of time, you can identify the points in which it's going to be the most relevant and get the maximum engagement, and then you can execute it that way.
It's a good point on longevity as well. It's thinking about the surroundings that you're filming in. If you are wanting to use it long term and keep reusing it, don't be filming in an office where you got all your Christmas decorations up, or if you're doing Movember, like make sure you're happy with that to be used for the next. I don't know why I'm looking at you.
Yeah, I was about to. Why are you looking at me? This isn't a hangover.
You've been doing Movember for about 4 years now, but it's just to be mindful of that and making sure that when it is going to be reused, that you are happy with how it looks, I guess.
And this is something you do too much. Like, if you're looking at rebranding, it sounds obvious, but don't be filming in those areas. Go fairly neutral.
And that kind of takes me on to the final point, which you have kind of mentioned a couple of times as we've gone through it, Jake, just around effective planning. And that is really the key, I would say, the key takeaway out of all this, whether you're getting us to create it, whether you're creating it yourself, what the different method is for creating it, is if you plan your content effectively, you're going to save a lot more money in the long run.
Yeah, definitely, because if you know exactly what you're going to be doing in 6 months' time when you're doing a project, if you were going to create 5 videos within 6 months and you just kind of take it one by one, you're paying for 5 projects there. But if you've planned it effectively, you can maybe only have to do 1 or 2 projects. So it is really kind of minimizing the amount of times you're going to have to engage with an agency or take time out of people's diaries.
And a perfect example of that is, say if you've got an event and you want to do some case studies, join them up. The amount of times if you've got all your customers at an event that a partner event that you're putting on, get another camera set up. You can bash out 5 or 6 little case study testimonial. It's just maximising. You've already paid for the film crew. You might as well get you charge a little. You pay a little bit extra for the editing of it, but you're going to get a lot more content, over the course of that period of time.
Yeah, if you're clear on what you're doing throughout the year, and everyone's kind of bought into that and has that in their heads, they can identify points in which you can maximize content and you can grab things here and there, and it just really kind of reduces the need to keep coming back and redoing things, and that's where I think costs rack up, is where you don't really know where you're going with it. You're just kind of going off the cuff.
Yeah, like you said, the biggest thing is to maximise the time or money that you've got, and to do that you need to plan effectively.
Yeah, and it's all about banking footage. I want to make sure I say that right. Banking footage is like, if you're interviewing somebody, like, you just need to, like, you want to think of other things or other content you might need to create. So if you're filming an interview with your CEO of your company about a particular thing, an announcement, what other things have you got coming up over the next couple of months? Do you want to say something about the sustainability angle of your business, or do you want to talk about are there other announcements that need to be made? Because if you get that content during that interview whilst those cameras are rolling, then you've got it. It's there, it's in the bank, and you can just edit it sort of in the future. But if you don't think or plan like that, and then you think, oh, actually I could do with this, then you're having to go, you're taking more time out of their diary, you're having to pay for a video company to go out and do it again. And it's just thinking, what else could we be getting? Even when you've got the film crew there for a day, what other things might we need in the future? Because you may as well ask us to get it, or any other company.
Other companies are available.
Yeah. You're much better off asking them on the day. Chris and Steve will probably hate me for saying this, because they probably just want to get off home after a long day. But you may as well just say, right, can we capture this? Can we capture that? Because then it's in the bank and we can edit it. Yeah. At a later date.
It works in all kind of stages of life, even when you're doing your shopping. If you're going out and you're just kind of grabbing ingredients here, there and everywhere, and you make one meal out of it, and then everything, all the excess goes to waste. But if you've kind of planned out everything that you're going to cook that week, you can reuse ingredients, you're going to spend a lot less rather than going to the shop 5 or 6 times.
Love that analogy, Jake.
Yeah, we should have called it that, cooking up whatever.
How to cook up content your audience devours.
Yeah, how to cook up delicious content that your audience devours.
Ready, steady, cut.
Yeah. Oh, like it. Right, well, there we go. I think that pretty much brings us to the end of this week's podcast. Thanks for joining me, chaps. How have you found that?
Yeah, I thought it was a really good discussion, actually. I think there's a lot of good things in there that people can hopefully take away.
Yeah, it's really relevant at the moment, and I think it's something that's just been at the front of everyone's minds, so it's good to kind of, get it all out on the table and basically just give advice and experience, I think. Yeah,
no, definitely, and everyone does want to and need to save money at the moment, so anything we can do there to help. So I guess that brings this week's episode to a conclusion, and I just kind of want to finish on those kind of 7 key takeaways before we leave. And this episode, as we mentioned, was all around how to save money when creating videos. So takeaway number 1 was all around creating your own content. Number 2 is to learn when to invest and when to save money. Number 3 was make the most of remote filming. You can save some money on your production costs. Number 4, explore edit-only or animation projects, because you can save some money there. Number 5 was to repurpose your content, make the most of it. Number 6 is to reshare your content. Don't be afraid to share those videos again and again. And finally, number 7, and the most important one, is all about planning effectively. The more you plan, the more you're going to get for your money. So thanks again for watching. Thanks again for listening. And stay tuned for the next episode, which I don't know what it is right now, but I'm sure it's going to be a good one.